Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. On Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Welcome to Inspired Conversations. I'm your host, Linda Joy, visibility catalyst and best-selling publisher at Aspire Magazine and Inspired Living Publishing. I am going to be joined today by a special guest, and we were just chatting offline. We have been following each other way back when she first released her book, which I had to grab a copy of, and we'll be talking about that more in a moment. And I was like, oh my God, sometimes you meet someone, even though it's virtually, and you just have this connection with them. So today we're going to be talking about creativity, one of my favorite topics, because since I was a younger girl, I've had to birth what's in my soul, and I never understood the depth of that need, that desire to always be creating. As a young woman, it was oil painting. I took private classes for about 22 years, and then about 25 years ago, I focused my creativity into my businesses. And I swear to you, I believe that's why I never feel like I'm working. I'm tapped into my joy, my flow, my creativity. So joining me today is author and shaman Carol Woodliff. We'll be talking about the sacred practice of creativity, the fears that arise, and yes, they will, and how we can move into sacred vulnerability. Carol is fascinated with the challenge of being authentically human while expressing our spirit callings. Her book, From Scared to Sacred, Lessons in Learning to Dance with Life, was an Indie Spiritual Book Award finalist. Carol has been studying healing and creativity for over 25 years. Through ceremonies in the shamanic traditions of the Andes, energy healing, coaching and writing workshops, she helps clients release trauma and blocks to love and creative expression. She believes, as you're about to discover, that we all have the ability to tap into the sacred flow of creativity, and in doing so, bring healing not only to ourselves, but the world. Welcome, Carol.
I am so happy to be here, Linda. Of course, when first thing I speak, the frog of my throat came out. So.
I get them all the time.
All right. I'm going to take a little sip of water, and then we're good to go.
Take your sip. Yeah, I am so excited to have you here. As we were talking about offline, I'm like, your book came out in 2012, and I remember ordering a copy. That's how far back we go, even before that. And we've been circling each other and sharing each other's stuff. So to have you here with me today is a blessing. So thank you.
I am honored to be here, Linda. I love what you do and how you have expressed yourself through your mission with your magazine, with these podcasts. I love it.
Well, and that's what I want to talk about today, because for so many people, especially those who struggle with even identifying with, I have a sister, she always says, oh my God, you got all the creative genes, I'm not creative. And I used to let her slide with that, right? I'm 56 now, so in my 20s and 30s, I go, yeah, maybe you're right. And then now I call bullshit on that, because she is creative in her own way if she would stop telling herself that. So we're going to talk about a lot of this in our call, but let's dive in, Carol, about the journey from scared to sacred and how that whole book message came to be, because I think it's such a beautiful story.
Well, it was in the early 2000s. I was juggling a number of things. I had been an actor in Hollywood, not that successfully, but I had, worked some jobs and wasn't really making money at doing that, and I was working in a corporate law firm to pay the bills, and then I decided I was going to study hypnosis because I loved that practice, which had helped me in acting. I was going to become a hypnotherapist, and nothing was gelling. I was still juggling all these plates to try to make an income, and it was exhausting. So one day I sat down with my journal, and I just basically had a heart-to-heart with the divine and said, I am so frustrated, and I'm so just angry that I can't make this work, and I'm scared that I'm going to be a failure my whole life. I am so scared. And I looked down and I had written, I'm sacred. I'm sacred. And I went, no, that's not what I meant. I meant I'm scared. And then this voice kind of came into my head and said, but you're not scared. You're sacred. And we want you to explore that. You may feel scared, but that's not who you are. And that opened up a whole period of listening to that voice and writing down lessons that it gave me. And From Scared to Sacred, the book, was about how easily our mindset, we can flip things. And we can, it's just flipping those two letters around that causes the difference between scared and sacred. And it's in the same way, the way we look at life. And we can focus on our fears and think that stops us, or we can focus on our journey and how beautiful it is to be here as a human being and make it a sacred practice. And so at the time I was also going through, my mother was transitioning. She had Parkinson's. She was losing ability, bit by bit by bit. So it was coming into not being my mother's daughter, but my mother's mother, in the sense of having to help take care of her. So the book became my way to work out these beautiful messages that I was getting from Spirit and what my day-to-day life was. So it's that dance between, we think when we have our spirit connection, we're going to make it all work and it's going to be lovely and, hearts and flowers and no problems. Well, that's not really the way life works. So it was my way of working it out and then sharing that working out very vulnerably with the rest of the world.
It's so beautiful because even the title, and I remember it was that title that, I didn't see it as a book title. I felt like it was speaking to me, right? Like it was my truth. And that's what really resonated with me. And the thing is, what I love about the work that you're doing in the world is, even though you were scared, even though I'm scared all the time, right, we don't allow it to stop us because we look at the sacredness of the creativity that was given to us, the ideas. Is that how you've been processing since you wrote the book, that you still get scared sometimes?
Oh, I get scared all the time. In fact,
okay, good, because me too.
I laugh. I wrote this book called From Scared to Sacred, and then, a lot of magical things happened as I stepped into that path. Like the book cover came from finding an artist on Pinterest and tracking her down and then having her say to me when she got my email, oh, love, I was at a psychic fair and someone told me I'd be working with a shaman, and I said I didn't know any. And she became the cover artist for my book. So there were all these magical things. And then when it came time to step up even bigger, I got scared. And I went back into my cave for a while because I was like, I'm not ready for that. So to me it's constantly a dance of, are you going to use an analogy from my childhood, are you going to be on the diving board and are you going to dive, or are you going to turn around and walk back down the ladder and off to the pool, out of the pool? And the only way to get over the fear of diving off a diving board is to dive. You don't get over the fear by waiting and getting therapy and all of that. So I always use that analogy, and to carry that analogy a little further, sometimes you're going to belly flop. You're going to take that first dive and it's not going to be perfect, and it's not going to be what you thought it was going to be. You're going to have a vision of how this is all going to work. So I'm constantly reminding myself of that 6-year-old on the diving board that, you have to dive and you may belly flop, but if you dive enough, you are going to swim. you're going to perfect that dive and magical things will happen. That's my little mantra for myself.
I love that analogy because isn't it so true? Wouldn't we tell our child to keep on trying? We wouldn't say, "Oops, sorry, you didn't dive well the first time, just give up." We would never tell our child that, but we sometimes will allow our inner child to let the fears lead the way, right? So we have to love her, nurture her. That's what I've had to do with myself over the years, that it's okay to be scared. I think we're taught that fear means don't move forward, stop. And I struggled with that for 30 years, Carol, and then finally felt the energy of what it felt like to have blocked creativity and not birth what's in my soul. And I finally said, listen, I'm struggling being fearful and scared. How much worse can it be if I try what's in my heart, what's in my soul, and birth it? It's going to feel a hell of a lot better than it does in this blocked energy. Is that what it felt like in your body, too, as you were going through all this?
Exactly. And it's that thing that how we label our fear is really the deal breaker. If we say, okay, I'm fearful, that means I'm sort of excited about this and there's a risk involved in putting myself out there this way, but I won't get what I want creatively or anything. You know, it's like dating is a risk. You have to put yourself out there to meet a person that you want to date. You have to put yourself out there. So is this butterflies or is this, dread? And a lot of times when you really check into it, it's more like I don't know if I can do this, or I hope this goes well. And that's an all systems go energy, but we aren't taught to look at it that way. And we have this false premise that we're going to get over our fear and then be ready. And that fear is a stop, as you said. So I think it's really important. I mean, I'm diving back into something where I'm all nervous about it again because as I said in the intro, that I had done acting for a while, and I'm getting to put together a one-woman show, and I'm going to a workshop that I haven't done that kind of work in years, and I'm diving in, and part of me is like, oh, you don't have to go. And then it's like, no, you have to go. You have to.
Yeah.
That little 4-year-old's hand, what if the kids don't like me? What if I'm not as talented as everyone else? All those things that come up and then go, you know what? Just try it. Just see how it goes.
I love that. I love that you're being courageous. And when we come back from our first break, Carol, I want to talk more about fears because I love the direction the conversation's going because, as you shared, sometimes we label our fears, and it was that label that prevents us from moving forward, not the actual fear. And that's what I found in my own case. And we'll be back in a moment with Carol Woodliff of carolwoodliff.com.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Inspiration for a woman's soul. Aspire Magazine, inspiring and supporting women on the path of self-discovery. Claim your free digital subscription today, which includes access to thousands of dollars of personal development bonus gifts from Team Inspiration partners. Claim your Aspire Magazine subscription today at subscribetoaspire.com.
Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth Radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Hey, America. America, we need to have a little talk. We've got more food than we know what to do with in this country, yet 17 million kids in America are struggling with hunger. Makes no sense. Luckily, the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks has volunteers gathering excess food and getting it to hungry kids. They're kind of like food angels. Hey, become a food angel yourself by supporting Feeding America in your local food bank at feedingamerica.org. We can't do it without your help. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM Radio Network.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations, and with me is shaman and author Carol Woodliff, and we're talking about creativity and fear and what it feels like, and we'll say this right up front. Your fears don't go away, right? I think they're part of, I look at them as my divine, spiritual or divine guidance system, Carol. Like, I don't look at them as a stop sign anymore, right? Because I believe our fears and anxiety, everyone labels it differently, is there to guide us if we look at the spiritual and emotional messages underneath. As you were talking about, the labels, right? Some of the other things that you do in your work, you talk about trauma, and that's a big one. But I want to hear from you what you mean by typical types of trauma patterns that you found that block creativity.
Trauma can be the big stuff. Like, you can have an abusive childhood where you don't feel worthy, and you had to learn to kind of make yourself small to survive. That's the big type traumas, and those can happen any time in life. It doesn't have to necessarily be childhood, but I find with creativity, there's something that happens in that like 5 to 9 range that often blocks people. But trauma can also be something little, like your art teacher told you your drawings weren't very good, or your English teacher said you'll never be a writer, or something like that. And it's not, but it's a seminal moment. It's not a big moment in the thing of saying, like, you got beaten, but your spirit gets beaten and you retract. And you're trying to prevent yourself from having any experiences like that. It's human to not want to be beat up, either physically or emotionally, but those sort of traumas about especially our creative soul can block us, and they make us fearful of taking any step. I mean, the Australian and the Commonwealth countries have a saying called the tall poppy syndrome. Don't be the tall poppy, don't stand out, you'll get cut down. And we have that naturally, those sort of fears that come from wanting to belong. But every great entrepreneur, every great artist, every great person who throws an amazing party takes that risk to do a little more than the average person. They put themselves into it more. So we have to look at that trauma and that ability that we want to pull back, and we have to work through that, be it through therapy, through energy work, through just writing about it in a journal and really going head-to-head with it and saying, is that who I want to be? Do I want to be the 4-year-old who was scared of, let's say, a parent's anger and lock myself away in my room because I didn't want to be vulnerable to that? Is that how I'm going to be my whole life? Am I going to lock myself in my room my whole life? And those sort of tough questions coming face-to-face with that fear, actually, I call it, facing that fear is the doorway that opens you into that creative expression. It's not the doorway that blocks you. It's like going to that fear and talking to it and the trauma and finding out what its messages are the ways that you get even more creative.
This whole conversation is resonating with me because I've had to live it like you, like so many who are listening. And we use a lot of the same language, Carol, and our experience is pretty similar, that I talk to my fear as if it's a child, right? Where before I was aware of my patterns, fear was big, right, and was hovering over me all the time, in the first half of my life. I made it big. Does that make sense? When I shifted my energy towards it, as you just so beautifully explained about the little girl, fear became someone not to be feared, but to be loved and embraced, because it's there. I think it's there to guide us to our deepest truth. That's what I've discovered on my own journey.
I so agree with that. I mean, if I hadn't, who would have thought the Catholic girl from the Midwest would end up calling herself a shaman? And that whole journey and the ability to listen to that creative source and write, and where I got led as I opened my heart and said, okay, I'm listening. Spirit, where am I going? What am I doing? And things were unrolled in little steps. It's not like someone gives you the path and says, okay, you're going to go here. It's more like, take this next step. Go take this class. Go talk to this person. And as I did that, then my creativity expanded. My life just expanded. And that fear became like what do I need to know from you? What's the message here? As opposed to, oh, I must stop and must, be careful. It became more, I need to be curious.
Oh, I love that. I love that word, curious. It just, doesn't it ignite something in you like, oh, I'm stepping on a magical path? If I follow my curiosity, if I follow my joy, to me it feels magical, right? So that word really resonates with me. Now, in your work with women, what are some of the challenges that you find women have in connecting or finding their voices, in their creative endeavors?
Well, the one that I'm sure comes to the top of most people's heads is carving out time where you're caretaking for yourself and giving yourself some room to actually explore your creativity rather than dealing with children and spouse or job and all the other things that we tend to have a very sacred honoring of caretaking of others, but not so sacred honoring of our own beingness and our own wanting to explore. So just giving a sense that our journey here is, yes, women, a lot of us have a lot of people around us who rely on us and that, but we need to find that space for ourselves. That's the first thing. The other thing is I find maybe it's in the collective consciousness that women have this fear of, to use a metaphor, being burned at the stake for their creativity. That somehow being creative and having a voice and putting it out there in, quote, a big way, whatever your version of big is, will kill you. It will, there's a fear, like I will be burned at the stake. I will be crucified. People will kill me. And there's things from the collective consciousness that actually happens. But it's also that I will die to myself if I start expressing myself fully. Old parts of myself are going to have to go. I can't be who I was and be this creative being. So there's a fear of death, and it's a very big, overarching fear when I work with people that they may not call it that, but it really is a fear of what do I have to let go of and what in me will die if I actually step forward.
Oh, that's a big one. And also, what will those I love think of my decisions as I move in this new direction? It's always about, for me it used to be about what will they think? What if my loved ones don't love me anymore because I'm becoming someone different? You're not becoming someone different. You're becoming the truth of who you are. Exactly. But I do remember going through that that fear of, is it going to, I've been in this relationship almost 25 years, but in my younger years it was, is me following this new path, this soul calling, is it going to change what is? And you're right. That's what scares us, because we don't want to rock the boat.
And sometimes we realize that maybe some people we're with can't handle it. And we will not necessarily say goodbye, but our relationship will change with certain people, and there's a not wanting to let go. But we also aren't giving our loved ones credit. And it's the Marianne Williamson quote about, if you own your light, you give other people permission to do the same. So of our children, our spouses, and that by being fully who we are, we're actually inviting them into a much more authentic relationship. Because if we're hiding these creative impulses, if we're hiding who we are, they don't really know us anyway. So it is, but that's a big fear for a lot of people, and it's certainly one that I've dealt with in my life, is like, if I step forward in this way, whatever it is. And I had that with my family when, I moved to LA, and I had a really good job. I was managing at a major law firm, one of the highest grossing corporate law firms in the country, and I was managing a paralegal program. So I had 150 employees. I was, to my mom and dad, I was, I had hit it. I had done what every person wants to do. I was a success. And I was miserable, and so I scaled my life back and started working more consulting and part-time in the legal industry and pursued being an actor. And my mom just couldn't figure out why the heck I would want to give up that cushy corner office job for a very insecure path. So, it took years for her to really realize that I was happier, and that was what was important. And I also got to realize that I was addressing by my actions her worst fears. She was a child with a depression.
No, I was just going to say, it just fed her. She was judging your decisions based on her own fears and story. It wasn't the truth of how she felt about them, but she didn't know any other script.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when we can realize that the people around us, they're working out of a script, and that maybe perhaps by living our truth, we show them that their script doesn't necessarily mean what they think it means. It's a tender process, and honestly, I do a lot of support with people on coaching on how to deal with family and how to talk to them. And we tend to be all or nothing, thinking, well, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to be an actress, and I'm going to be this big success in that, and that means everything else has to go. And that we don't have to do that.
No, I usually recommend that you don't.
Yes. It's we don't have to burn the bridge behind us. We can take little steps, until we really feel it's time to take that big leap. Because sometimes people think you got to take the big leap, and there's a whole trail. Like, you don't have to leap, but you don't have a leap over the canyon for 4 miles, but you're anticipating that leap, and you got a lot of hiking to do before you get up to that stream crossing or whatever it is that has you nervous or fearful. You've got a lot of work to do, and you can do that creative work without
without causing more chaos in your life. And when we come back from our next break, Carol, I want to talk about that, because I love what you said. It's a journey to get to the summit, right? You don't cut the path off by quitting your full-time job or making major life decisions that can affect other areas of your life, but you just stay on the path, and you do get to the summit. That's what I found in my own life also. And we'll be back in a moment. I'm with Carol Woodliff of carolwoodliff.com, and today's conversation is about creativity, fear, honoring your creative soul. We're going to be talking about in the next half of the show about sacred vulnerability, about cultivating a relationship with your joy, your hearts, and your spirits. I'll be back in a moment.
Free your mind. Expand your soul. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Are you being called to step into your truth and embrace your divinity? Are you ready to align your heart and soul, live an authentic life, and become a divine magnet for love and abundance? It's time to listen to your inner wisdom and clear the blocks holding you back from your best life. Leading intuitive prosperity coach, Akashic Records practitioner, and evidential medium Jamie Hearn of LiveYourDivinity.com empowers and supports spiritual women like you to align your inner and outer worlds, embrace your soul's truth, and live your divinity. Through her intuitive gifts, grounded wisdom, and empowered coaching, Jamie guides women back into sacred alignment with their truth. Visit LiveYourDivinity.com to learn more about Jamie's empowering programs and to schedule an Akashic record reading.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hi everyone, this is Shay Parker, the host of Best of the Best, which airs live right here on IOM Radio every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific. I'm super excited to bring you expert guest hosts, spiritual discussions, free psychic readings, and so much more. I can promise that you will not want to miss this one-of-a-kind, fun, yet touching, down-to-earth show. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Pacific on OTRFM. This is Shay Parker, and I can't wait to see you there.
The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is. A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. With me today is Carol Woodliff, author and shaman, and the author of Scared to Sacred, Lessons in Learning to Dance with Life. So, Carol, right before the break, we were talking about, I had a lot of clients who, because they waited so long to honor their truth, they kind of got to that point where, that's it, I'm quitting my six-figure job, I'm going to become a, whatever it may be, life coach, write a book, whatever their dream is. But I think it's because they rejected that aspect for so long, they feel like it's an all-or-nothing time. And I always say, I don't recommend doing that. I recommend slowly nurturing this new dream, right, this creative realm, creating sacred space to birth it without, what is that saying? Don't cut off your nose to spite your face or something. And I always tell them that job, it gives you the security to follow your dreams. You'll know when it's time to leave. But sometimes I think we're all so eager, right, when that creative urge comes. Have you found that with your clients too?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things is the contrast sometimes can be quite jarring. You're working on something that feeds your creative passion maybe on the weekend, and then you go back to your job and it doesn't have the spark and it doesn't have what it had, and you're like, but I want more of that. I want more of that feeling. And we so want to get that we forget the honor and that of what the job gives us. Like that job gives us some financial stability, because being a starving artist or a starving coach or, having the checkbook and, doing the numbers down to the very penny to make sure you can meet your bills, is no more honoring or sacred than working the job. So we have to look at ourselves and go, wait a minute, we really have to work on that. I love what you said earlier about creating sacred space for our creativity and for that business or business we want to build, book we want to write, painting we want to do, whatever our creative calling is. So often it's the last thing on our list. And part of the thing, we're like, I don't want to have this job. I don't want to have this thing because I want time to create. I want time to make this business grow. Well, that's part of the thing is you're not creating a sacred space for yourself, even if it's a couple hours a week, where my Tuesday morning at 5 a.m. is my sacred time for working on this, or whatever time it is for you. I'm a night owl, so I would tend to stay up and cut myself short on sleep and be wonderfully creative from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. a couple times a week. And I didn't have to quit the job completely. I just had to make those times for me to create sacred, that they were my commitment to myself.
It's so important because I hear a lot of, not just entrepreneurs, but, I work with a lot of authors and writers. It's just those in a lot of personal and spiritual development. And they always say, Linda, I don't know how to find the time. I said, well, there's the issue right there. You don't find it. You can't find time anywhere. We're all given the same 24 hours. You need to create time and create space in your calendar. That's a whole different energy and vibration. If you're waiting to find time, it will never happen, right? You tap into your creative energy. Like I teach something called spiritual energetic profile. We all have one. Like I giggled to myself when you said you have a night owl. I'm like, oh boy, we have different spiritual energetic profiles. If you read my Facebook post, I get up between, it used to be 2, but now it's 3 to 4:30. That's my creative time. But my team loves to work late at night. Does that make sense? But I find my creative energy time, and it's sacred to me. It is in my schedule now, because if we wait to find it, it's never going to happen. And that's why I said you've got to create sacred space for your creativity. One of the things I noticed, as I'm sure you have, start wherever you are. And once you create that sacred space, I don't care if it's an hour a week. We all have busy lives. What will happen is you're reprogramming your soul, I believe, to say, I want more of this. And opportunities will come your way. And it makes that full-time job, I think, easier to get through because you're nurturing this other part of yourself. Have you found that?
Exactly. And, when I was writing From Scared to Sacred, I made a commitment to myself, to Spirit, that I would show up an hour a day. No, an hour every single day. And,
I love it.
And what would happen is I had created a life where I was doing hourly work in law firms, so I was being paid as a paralegal to come in the evening, so it used my time. So I would get up in the morning and do my stuff, and 10 o'clock I would sit down and I would write for an hour. And then on days where I didn't, let's say I had an appointment or something, I'd get in bed, and that commitment had become so strong that I could not sleep until I got back up and did my hour of writing for that day. And it was a strong commitment. And people say, well, how did you do that? Well, certain things fell by the wayside for me. I chose not to watch television. I was like, I can sit and watch television. Now my thing would probably be, I need to get off of Facebook a little bit more. I need to set more defined times, because a lot of times in the evening I'm, farting around, pardon the language, on Facebook. So where's my time? You have to be really honest with yourself about what you're doing with your time. And I'm not telling anyone they can't watch television or be on Facebook, but we do all only have so many hours in a day, and when we have a creative passion calling for us, we have to make room for it. And if we don't make room for it, it's like the pouty child in the corner that's just waiting, and we get grumpier and grumpier, and we don't even know why. And so it's really important for us to carve out that space, and I think it's one of the hardest things for people to do in the beginning, but once they do, it is like it creates itself. It starts, the commitment and showing up starts creating little magic and little synchronicities around you that...
Oh, yeah. It does. It's so magical, and I love when my clients come back and tell me the things that are happening, and I know it to be true because it happened to me. It happened to you. I think it's just part of being connected with your divine source, which I believe creativity flows from, right? Because it's the essence of who we are. It's about joy and play, which is we're going to talk about after our next break. In fact, before we go to break, I want to share a quote, everyone, that I've been sharing of Carol's on social media for a long time, and it really just, I share it all the time because it speaks to me. And it's, when we cultivate a relationship with our joy, our hearts and spirits expand, and we remember who we are. And I think it always spoke to me, Carol, because that's how I felt. It is a relationship. It's a relationship with a divine source, whatever we may call that. And I've come to, for myself, I can only share my journey, I feel that our creativity comes from that source. But it's also that last part of your quote. We remember who we are, not who the world told us to be, not who our parents told us to be, not the roles and labels, but the truth of who we are. So it's such a beautiful quote, my friend. And we're going to let's take our final break so we can dive deeper into this talk about joy and play and why you feel it's so important to develop that relationship. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. With me today is Carol Woodliff of carolwoodliff.com. Be sure to swing by her site and learn more about her sacred offerings and, of course, her book, Scared to Sacred. We'll be back in a moment.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Are you ready to become a true creator in your life? Bryna Haynes, best-selling author, alchemist, and personal evolution expert, created the Choose Your Evolution project to help mission-driven entrepreneurs, change-makers, and influencers like you live into their dreams in a big way. Using a unique combination of quantum science, metaphysics, spirituality, neurohacking, and pure soul-powered wisdom, Bryna bridges the gap between knowing your truth and living your truth. She'll show you how to be the change in every area of your life so you can live and create without limits and change the world from the inside out. Watch Bryna's free 7-part masterclass for manifestors, How to Create Everything You Want, at chooseyourevolution.blog.
Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business.
Me, a cat, moving in with a new human. It took a little getting used to. She has these weird games she likes to play, like this giant feather. She sticks it in my face. I swat it away. She sticks it in my face. I swat it away. It's almost like she thinks I enjoy it. But seeing how much fun she gets out of it, well, I guess it makes it all worth it. Humans.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
This is Terry Van Horn, and I want to invite you to join me for my weekly radio show, Hailing Light, on OMTimes Radio, every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On Hailing Light, we want to bring love, light, and blessings into your world. You can find out more about us at www.healinglightonline.com. Blessings.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. I'm your host, Linda Joy. And right before the break, I shared this quote, which is going to open our last segment of the show, and I'm going to repeat it. When we cultivate a relationship with our joy, our hearts and spirits expand, and we remember who we are. I just love that quote, Carol, because it just resonates with me on such a soul level. So let's talk about that. Why do you feel it's important that we create a relationship with joy and play?
Because we're so joy and play deprived in this society. We're all about work and scheduling and having, time management and all that stuff, which is all good. But if it's not leading to that spontaneous, loving experience of life, which is what I call joy. Joy is, I just love my life today because I get to do this thing. And if you look at little children, they have a connection to their joy. They're dancing. They don't care if anybody thinks their dance is good. They make up a song and they sing it spontaneously, and they're just in that space of being them. And as we get older, we buy into all of society's rules, and we forget that the reason why we're going to work is to supply currency for our joy and for our survival. But most of us have the ability to not more than survive, but thrive. And if you look at indigenous cultures that are very, by our Western world standard, poor. What I found with the tribes that I have worked with in the Andes is their sense of joy just in being together, and laughter and all that is so big. And we reserve it sometimes just for, the Christmas party or this, rather than our life. Our life, to be in a relationship with what things make me spontaneously or that I plan because I just love them. In my book, I talk about really reconnecting to my joy through going to listen to live music, and how for a period I was so disconnected from anything that made me happy. And then I saw a gentleman on a reality TV show, and I started after the TV show following his band and going to concerts and meeting new people, and my life kept expanding. But the interesting thing about it is my business started growing too.
Yes.
So I was doing all these networking events and trying to get clients and trying. And then I stepped off of that for a while and would go, I'm driving up to Sacramento to see a concert for the weekend. And I'd come back and there'd be 4 messages of people booking appointments that I maybe had met months before, but it was almost like the universe automatically gave me an affirmation that me doing something that filled up my heart and that made me feel alive and happy to be here actually was the key to unlocking growth in all areas of my life.
It's so beautiful. I found that to be so true. I've been an entrepreneur since 92. I had a retail store for 10 or 11 years that when I got off welfare, I started and really grew it. But I was out of balance. I was working 16-hour days, living on 4 medium-iced coffees with you don't want to know how much sugar in each one. And it wasn't until I went on the spiritual path and started to incorporate play into my life. And it did take me a while because I was so out of balance. I had to get the pendulum back, even close to center. But now I do a 4-day work week. My whole team does. I try to take at least 1 week off a month. If I'm in the middle of a launch or a client's book, of course I don't. And when I say I take a week off, it's so I can work on the creative elements of my business, right? Not the tasks. Right. So it's all about following my joy, but things open up completely when we do. And people are like, how can following my joy and going to a concert bring me more business? It does when you follow your passions and your joy. It's amazing, isn't it?
Well, if you're you could talk about the Esther Hicks, Abraham thing. It's a vibrational thing. When we're in the slog, I call it, there was a commercial a long time ago. I don't think it was Dunkin' Donuts or one of them. The guy gets up at 3 in the morning and he's like, I got to go make the donuts. I got to get up. I got to go do that.
No, I used to, yeah.
And a lot of us live our lives in that energy of, I got to do this next. Even when we're in our own business, we get, as you said, so task-oriented that we aren't connected to the joy of why we wanted to create the business in the first place. What are we excited about in our business? What are we excited about writing about for, a blog post? What are we excited about? And that energy of being connected to something that really excites us or energizes us or makes us say, wow, that was a great day, that carries over, and that's really attractive. It's attractive to the universe, and it's also people are like, wow, there are so many people in life going, I got to make the donuts. I like her because Linda Joy is about joy, and I like her energy, and I like what she does, so I want to hang out with her. And that's how it to me, unfolds. And it's just like if you're stuck on something, what is it that you loved as a kid? Did you love to sing? Did you love to dance? Did you love to draw? And there's a beautiful quote, and I'm going to get it wrong, but it's been attributed to two different people who sort of walk the shaman path. Gabriel Roth, who did dance.
Yes. Yeah.
And Angela Ariane. I think it's actually Angela's quote. I think she wrote it in the opening to Gabriel Roth's book. But it's like, in ancient societies, people used to go to a shaman about their lethargic energy and that, and they'd say, when did you stop dancing? When did you stop singing? When did you stop, and like enjoying silence and being in nature and all those things? When did you stop doing that? That's what you need to do, because that brings you back to, once again, my journey of you come back to who you really are, not who people told you to be, not who you thought you had to be. People might think I'm almost 60 and, heading, here's that 60-year-old woman heading to, the Viper Room in Los Angeles. What's she doing? She's enjoying the experience of the discovery of new music. And it could be, wow, that was a bad night. Not one of those bands excited me. But it's still the fun of going out and going, wonder what I'll discover. Wonder who I'll see here. Wonder what that will feel like. And that's the curiosity piece, to kind of loop back to the beginning where we talked about curiosity.
Yes.
Our childlike wonder is what we need to be connected to our creativity. What happens if I take these two sticks and make them an airplane? That's what the energy.
It's getting back to remembering the essence of who we are, who we always have been, right? It's shedding all the layers that disconnected us from our creativity, because it's always been there. We just became disconnected. And Carol, in our last few moments, is there a piece of wisdom, guidance, more than you've already shared, that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think I'd just like to wrap back up to the idea of your fears are the doorway, and that if we stop labeling the fear as a bad energy. I find it really common in our lives that people talk about fear and anger and things as toxic. The emotion itself isn't toxic. The emotion is like a compass point, and it's telling you where you're directed, like where you've been directed, and where you might need to recalibrate, and where you might need to change your thoughts or get help with some, maybe you're stuck here and maybe you need help. Maybe you need to talk to a friend about why you're stuck. Maybe you need to write about it, journal about it, and really delve into that anger, that fear, all those things that you label as bad emotions have messages for us. So dive deep into those feelings. If you're frustrated, if you're angry, if you're fearful, what are they telling you? They're just giving you a course correction or telling you to plow forward and jump off that diving board. And so what if you belly flop? You took your first dive.
Exactly. And that's such a beautiful piece of guidance and wisdom, one that I found has worked in my life. So thank you, my friend. Thank you, for being here. I was like, but I want to keep going. And what a wonderful conversation. And I invite our listeners to visit Carol at carolwoodliff.com. Swing by, learn about her book, her programs, read her wisdom on her blog. And again, Carol, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Linda. This has been a delight.
And you're welcome. And everyone, until next time, choose joy, choose love, choose happiness, my friends. Blessings.
Thanks for listening to Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. Join our sacred space every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern and meet leading female visionaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. Inspired Conversations with Linda Joy is a soulful venue where guests share the obstacles they've overcome, along with wisdom and lessons learned on their personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic and soulful living.